All right, so Jim Cavanaugh, this is your area of expertise. Let's talk about this gun, a ghost gun. For those who are not familiar with guns that are 3D printed, although we have certainly talked about them over the course of the last couple of years as they have become available, in terms of IDing them, in terms of traditional ballistics, is this investigation the same as it would be if it was a gun you bought down at your local gun shop, if it was a more traditional handgun, if it was an AR-15? Or is something that's made on a 3D printer a different kind of investigation?
Right, Chris. Well, first I would say that we don't know that it's a ghost gun made on a 3D printer. The chief of detectives speculated that.
It may have been made. May have been made. Is what he said. Yep.
Right. He said may have been made. Right. And many ghost guns are not made on 3D printers at all. In fact, most of them aren't. So that's just one possibility. Ghost guns are sold on the internet under what we call, 60, 70, 80% kits. So the gun is a regular metal frame receiver, but it's not a complete gun. And so then you have to buy the other parts of the gun, again, on the internet or at a gun show, and you have to do some milling and drilling, a few hours of work to put it together. It's a real gun. It has everything a real gun has. It just doesn't have a serial number. It doesn't have a manufacturer's stamp, all required by federal law. Does it leave marks in the barrel when it shoots a projectile on the cartridge? Yes. Does it leave marks on the bullet? Yes. Does it leave a firing pin mark on the primer? Yes. All of those things are the same. It's just it's untraceable. Now, if it's a 3D printed gun, it's going to depend on what the material they used when they 3D printed it. And that sometimes may give the firearms examiner some difficulty in matching it. But my guess is it's not 3D printed. It could be, but it could very well be one of these kits off the internet. Again, the silencer is probably a ghost silencer as well. I was really surprised when the NYPD came out and thought this was a veterinary gun, because when you look at the video, it's clearly not. It's clearly not a veterinary gun. The gases, the gun smoke comes out of the top ejection port. He racks the slide multiple times. Nothing he did was action like a veterinary gun. That was always thought that was a bad lead to follow, because that's not what that gun is. So in a nutshell, this case is, beauty captures the beast. If it wasn't for the clerk at the hostel who flirted with the killer, we wouldn't have a full-face picture. And I commend the commanders of NYPD Detective for releasing those pictures quickly. And also, which hasn't been said yet, but really good work by the Altoona PD and certainly the employee of McDonald's, who I would hope is going to be $60K richer for giving the tip in. But Altoona PD also, they didn't dismiss it out of hand. They went into it, like Rob said. They interviewed him. They gave him a Terry frisk. Hey, find the gun. What's interesting is in a New York video, when he shoots Mr. Thompson, if you can watch it all the way through, as he goes past Mr. Thompson, he doesn't put the gun in the backpack. He doesn't stop. He stuffs it down the left side of his pants. And he's caught with the gun a week later. Now, that shows one of two things. He's a doofus because he's carrying a murder weapon a week later, or this was only one murder and he was going to do more murders, and so he wanted to keep the gun. So when the chief of detective says the manifesto railed against corporate America, that gives me pause that maybe this wasn't the only person he intended to shoot, because he's keeping the murder weapon. And it's a big risk to walk around with a murder weapon. He's going to find that out.
Well, yeah, that's certainly a possibility, Cedric. And, walking around with the gun, walking around with the ID that matches the ID of where you checked in when you were in Manhattan a week earlier, those kinds of things. But a couple of things. Well, first of all, I should say, according to those who've seen the manifesto, if that's what you want to call it, but it's a 3-page note that is in the possession right now of local police, at least according to NYPD. He did not name anyone else, so, we don't know. But first of all, the fact that he had that note outlining, as they put it, the motive and mindset, but also sitting in a McDonald's. If you're hungry and you're on the run, don't you go in get your lunch, and get out, get away from people who might recognize you. I wonder if, Cedric, I'm overthinking that, the fact that he had on his person the gun, the ID, 3 pages, maybe suggesting he wants people to know exactly why he did this. He wrote it down, and then sitting at a very public place, a McDonald's. Can't imagine many more public places than that, Cedric.
Well, that may be suggestive of a number of things. One, clearly it could be, and coming to mind to me, quite frankly, was he ready to be captured? And clearly his face has been seen all across the country and around the globe. And even though he used his mask majority of the time, they say he took it off his face, of course, when he put food in his mouth. But it does make you wonder. But also at the same time, you're talking about someone who murdered someone openly in the middle of a street and attempted to flee. That speaks a lot to his mindset and how he thinks, feels, view, and experience the world that he lives in. So there are also going to be further information, I'm quite sure, that we're going to learn about before the day is over and into tomorrow as well, too. But I do find it interesting. At this point, he's still considered a person of interest. They had not announced a formal arrest. I would imagine that's coming later, but that speaks to the professionalism and the thoroughness. I think our law enforcement agencies want to make sure that this case is airtight based on evidence that they've gathered over the last week.
Yeah, and we don't know, Rob D'Amico, whether or not in this questioning he said, you know, I want to assert my Fifth Amendment rights. We don't know whether he said, I'd like to see a lawyer. But who would be questioning him, and what would be the keys as they look toward potentially charging him, arresting him?
So in the beginning, as they were first talking to him and he wasn't in custody, anything he said is admissible. So once they determined he gave the fake ID and then they put him in the car, now in custody, then that's when the Miranda rights should come out. So don't know if they did it or if they brought him down to the police station and hopefully they Mirandized him then, because at this point you just want to be safe. You want to make sure that everything he says stays as evidence. So you read the Miranda warning. They may have been in touch with the NYPD. NYPD could have said, hey, we're sending someone out in a helicopter, like kind of wait for it for us to get out there, or hey, try to build some rapport. We're going to be out there in 45 minutes, an hour. It's a 4-hour drive. So I assume with everything that they got, they probably fly some folks out there. But you really want to keep whatever he says admissible. So if they're building rapport with them and not asking them direct questions, you can take that. But again, readers' rights, knowing NYPD was on the way, they may have waited. They probably took physical pictures of the manifesto, probably sent them to the officers that were coming in again, questioning them, because you want to be able to talk to them about it. I think he wants his story to be told. So I think coming in and having some empathy, understanding his manifesto may get him to talk. If I did get a chance to look at his Twitter account, what was surprising is he had 3 pictures up, and the middle one was an X-ray of a spine with, it seemed to be like 4 screws on the bottom of the spine, and it was an X-ray photo. Again, something to deal with healthcare that may be relevant that they can talk to him about.
Literally like an X-ray with screws in a spine.
Yes, from the side, and it was a lower spine, and it looked like 4 large screws into the spinal cord on the X-ray. Don't know if it was his or if this was related to a family member or something like that. But again, it's, I think, significant. And the detectives that are going in to talk to him want to come up with, hey, how are we going to, again, you don't go in hostile with this. You want to talk to him. He's got a story to tell. It's all part of getting him to admit it and talk to him about it. So you come in and you have some empathy for having maybe denied health care coverage. I know what you're talking about. Like, I get it. It looks like you had an injury. Can you tell us about that? To get him to talk, to build that rapport. Again, though, with Miranda warnings beforehand.
Yeah, and I will say, out of an abundance of caution, NBC News has not independently confirmed his social media accounts or anything that may be on them, although I feel quite confident that our teams are working on that right now. Let's talk a little bit, Charles Coleman, about Alvin Bragg, because we heard a little shout out that he got, I think it was from the police commissioner, who said he's been working on this 24/7 from the very first moment that this shooting happened. You know a little bit about how a case gets built. So talk to me about the things that have been going on in the 5 days and what would be happening now. I'm assuming that there is a prosecutorial team already in place on this.
Yes, Chris. What's likely happening is that the DA's office is providing support to NYPD and has been providing support to law enforcement through their detective investigators. And what detective investigators are basically a special team of investigators and detectives that are members of the NYPD, but assigned specifically to the DA's office. And what they do is they follow up with specific leads that are intended to benefit the DA's office, because they're trained specifically by prosecutors around what they need to put together a case. As everyone has been talking, one of the things that I've been thinking about is, as far as the investigation is concerned, it is critically important that all the steps of questioning are handled appropriately and all I's are dotted and T's are crossed. One of the reasons for that is because you don't want to have later on with the prosecution of whomever ends up being arrested for this, an issue with suppression of a confession, an issue with suppression of a statement, or an issue with suppression of anything that has been confiscated or acquired from the detainment of an individual that's connected to an arrest. And so the detective investigators, as well as the prosecutors from Alvin Bragg's office, are going to be working very closely with the NYPD to make sure that everything in this questioning and anything that's secured as far as a statement is done up to snuff, so that they don't have problems down the line when it comes to an actual prosecution.